Fruma Schapiro is a sought-after speaker and lecturer. Together with her husband, Rabbi Nachum, she went on the Rebbe's Shluchos to Sydney in 1989, establishing a successful Chabad house and community center in the St. Ives area. In addition to leading the Chabad house with her husband, she is also the director of their growing preschool. She gives weekly classes, coordinates Chasid programs, and counsels teenagers and women. Their new center offers Shabbatons, retreats, and leadership camps for students from public schools, as well as Sydney's Jewish day schools. She and her husband and family are responsible for bringing many Jews closer to Yiddishkeit. A number of these people are now shluchim of the Rebbe around the world today. Please welcome Fruma Schapiro for the keynote address.
Rabbanim, fellow shluchos, and distinguished friends around the world. It is an honor, but most humbling, for me to share my reflections with you this evening. Before I commence, I would like to express my gratitude to Hashem for giving me the bracha of a life of shlichus. I pay tribute to my dear husband, Rabbi Nachum Schapiro, and our children, indeed to all of our husbands and families who are so integral to every aspect of our shlichus, without whose support we would not be here this evening. The theme this evening is Eskeit a Chasid. What is a Chasid? The term Chasid conjures up different images to different people. As I was growing up, the people who were most near and dear to me formulated the definition of a Chasid in my mind. My parents, Rabbi and Rebbetzin Feldman, were sent by the Rebbe in 1968 as the first shluchim to Sydney, Australia. My siblings and I have watched as our parents have worked with tireless dedication for the Rebbe's shluchos. I often think about how hard it must have been for my grandparents, Rabbi and Rebbetzin Mendel and Rachel Feldman of blessed memory, who were shluchim in Baltimore, Maryland, to bid farewell to their only child as he and his new bride, my mother, set out to relocate to the furthest place from them on earth. What was it like for them to know that for the rest of their lives they would see their only child on infrequent occasions, and their only grandchildren even less frequently? Their only methods of communication back then would be the occasional telegram, airmail, and rare, expensive phone call. Yet not only did these loving parents not discourage or question the proposed move, they wholeheartedly embraced it. As difficult as it must have been, they put their own joys aside for the sake of their fellow Jews, because that's what Hasidim of the Rebbe do. So growing up, there was no doubt in my mind, nor in the minds of all my siblings, as to which path we would want for our own lives. At this point, I would like to extend a bracha, if I may, to my dear mother-in-law, Mrs. Gutta Shapiro, who is here with us this evening. She and Ibadol Ben Chaim L'Chaim, my father-in-law, Rebbe Levi Yitzchak Shapiro, a true Chasid, raised 3 generations of Chasidim and Shluchim, soll sie sein gesund und stark and have much nachas from all of them. Let us pay tribute to all the Babbas and Zaydas and to all the great and brave pioneers of Shlichus. Whilst we all have our own experiences that define a Chasid in our minds, how did the Rebbe define a Chasid? In a landmark statement presented by the Rebbe, made in the 8th of Iyar entry to a spiritual diary called Hayom Yom, the Rebbe defines a Chasid. The Rebbe writes, Chasidim seinen Shluchim von Rebben. This means a Chasid is a shliach, an emissary. Hence, Chasid, Shliach are synonymous. A Chasid, a Shliach, a lamplighter, an ambassador, is one who actualizes and embodies the Rebbe's missions and goals in his or her life. What is the goal, the mission? In 1956, the Rebbe wrote a letter to Yitzchak ben Tzvi, who was, at that time, serving as the second president of Israel. In his letter, he wrote these words: "From the day I went to Cheder, and even before then, the picture of the final redemption started forming in my mind. The Rebbe dreamed of a time where the children of Hashem, whom the Rebbe loved so much, would no longer have to suffer. Indeed, in virtually every talk he gave, letter he wrote, and directive he issued, he made reference to this goal. The Rebbe taught us that it would be that one mitzvah performed by that one Jew somewhere in the world that would be the last deed necessary to usher in this time, the coming of Mashiach. As the Rebbe's Shluchim, we have been sent out to every corner of the world to love and to reach out to as many Jews as humanly possible, strengthening their connection to Hashem and His Torah, igniting their spark within, that is their Yiddish neshama, and encouraging the performance of that one extra mitzvah. In addition, as the Rebbe's Shluchim, we are responsible to serve as a light among the nations, infusing our respective environments, Jewish and non-Jewish alike, with an awareness of our Creator, enlightening people with aspirations towards a higher set of moral values. Every true Chasid is, in fact, a shliach, an emissary charged with these responsibilities, working in his or her environment to turn this dream into a most achievable reality in our times. Underpinning the Rebbe's outlooks, philosophies, and directives was the Rebbe's ability to perceive the goodness, the godliness, and essence within all of creation, including, and most of all, the precious soul within each and every one of us. The Rebbe did not only want us to reach out to every Jew so that we could bring Mashiach. The Rebbe wanted Mashiach because he loved every Jew. And as a result, he wanted us to be able to live the highest quality of life. When we carry out our shlichus in a manner reflecting this approach, we are connected and escape a chasid. There goes a chasid. When I was not quite 3 years old, my parents took their children, my siblings, and myself to the Rebbe for what was to be my first Yechidus audience with the Rebbe. My mother dressed us in our finest Shabbos clothes and warned us in no uncertain terms that we were to behave ourselves, not say anything without being asked, and to stand still. My parents gave us the pre-Yechidus talk, how lucky we were to be spending time with the Rebbe, and little me was very excited. As we entered the Rebbe's room, I let go of my mother's hand, and to my parents' horror, I ran enthusiastically to where the Rebbe was sitting behind his desk, put out my hand to the Rebbe, cried out, "Shalom Aleichem, Rebbe!" Well, the Rebbe smiled warmly, shook my hand in return, and replied, "Shalom Aleichem." Suffice to say that my parents were sufficiently embarrassed by this breaking protocol and didn't know where to put themselves in the face of their little girl who simply couldn't follow instructions. 2 years later, we went into Yechidus again with an additional sibling. There were 4 of us at this stage. As we entered the Rebbe's room, the Rebbe scanned all the children with his deep, penetrating eyes, looked directly at me, and said, "Shalom Aleichem." It took my parents a moment to figure out why the Rebbe had turned to me out of all the children with such a warm and embracing greeting. Think about it. In the span of 2 years, the Rebbe saw thousands of men, women, and children of all ages. Yet the Rebbe remembered and recognized one little girl from Australia. The Rebbe made sure that this little girl and her parents would not feel self-conscious about the incident 2 years earlier. The Rebbe took a genuine interest in one little child because he genuinely loved every single child of Hashem unconditionally as though they were his own. This is our Rebbe, and this is what he expects from us. This means that when that for failure? You never know. The Rebbe would call that a resounding success. In the 8th of Iyar Hayom Yom, the Rebbe also writes, a shliach is ein zach mit der meshaleach. A shliach, an emissary, is one entity with the person who sends him. As man tut is man makusher. As the Chasid actively discharges his mission, he is bound up with the Rebbe, bound up with his entire being. Es geht a Chasid, there walks a Chasid, est a Chasid, eats a Chasid, and schlaft a Chasid, sleeps a Chasid. The emissary's mundane routines, how he or she walks and talks, and even how he or she eats and sleeps, is a distinct reflection of the Rebbe himself. A true Chasid and Shliach is one who is thoroughly permeated with everything the Rebbe represents, a true servant of Hashem. When a shlucha walks out into the streets of her designated shlichus, it should be obvious that es geht a Chasid, that there walks a Chasid, a person who is an example to others, a lamplighter bringing light to those around, living, breathing, walking, talking, and acting as a Chasid. Sitting here tonight, in this room alone, are close to 3,000 out of some 4,500 special Hasidim, shluchos from across the globe, women who have consciously chosen to dedicate every moment of their lives to fulfilling the shlichus of the Rebbe, shluchos whom the Rebbe considered as his very own children, because these are his unique representatives who are actively working diligently and tirelessly, implementing the global vision of the Rebbe 24/7. These shluchos do not merely dream the dream or talk the talk. These shluchos walk the walk, epitomizing this hayom yom es geht a Chasid. The Rebbe was only one person, but his vision, his passion, and his energy has been implanted within us, his spiritual progeny, as we adopt and live this vision. So as we gather here tonight, we need to honestly, privately dig deeply within ourselves and ask ourselves, what identifies us practically as shluchos? We need to ask ourselves, are we doing everything in our power to make this dream come true? Are we the shluchos the Rebbe dreamed of? In essence, every Chasid should be asking themselves this question. In fact, every Jew should be asking themselves this question. Am I living up to and representing my mission, my purpose on earth? As shluchos, people often ask us, why do you do what you do? I think the answer is self-evident. The life of shlichus is a tremendous privilege, serving a purpose greater than yourself on a daily basis. People crave, I mean essentially crave, to know what their purpose is in this world. As Chabad Shluchim, we know with certainty, beyond a shadow of a doubt, what our purpose is. And the fact that this goal is tied into the wisdom, vision, and soul of such a great tzaddik is a tremendous privilege. It is a gift to be a chasid, a shliach. Whilst there are so many role models we can aspire to learn from, who is the quintessential chasid, one with his mishaleach? Ironically, it would have to be the Rebbe himself. Notwithstanding his own greatness, the Rebbe didn't take any credit for himself. Rather, he attributed his life's achievements to his Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe. As a chasid, a true servant of God, his every move reflected the directives of his Rebbe. Even when we asked him for brachas, the Rebbe's answer always was, Azkir al-Hatzion, I will pray for you at the grave of my father-in-law. I am just a conduit. The Rebbe taught us by example that the key to our success as shluchim is humility, to consider ourselves as conduits, the energy of the tzaddik flowing through us. Ein zach mit der meshaleach, one with the tzaddik who empowers us. Amazing stories that we all have of how we have miraculously helped others, connected to their soul, or given the exact guidance needed, is not because we are great, it's because we have chosen to follow the directives of a tzaddik. And because of this connection, the Rebbe works through us. Our spiritual success as shluchim is in direct proportion to whether it can be said about us as gate, a hasid, a conduit. In the mid-1970s, a Chabad shliach received a phone call to please save a Jewish girl who was about to marry out of the faith and join a cult. The shliach set out to find this girl in a remote town. It was Friday, and as circumstances turned out, he was held up. Shabbos was approaching. He drove into a local gas station in this small town, described the couple to the owner, and asked the owner if he'd seen them. Yes, said the man, you see that building over there? That's where they live. The shliach took his emergency supply of matzah gefilte fish and wine from his car and spent Shabbos on their couch. They had many discussions. The rabbi tried to convince the young lady to explore her own religion, but she was completely disinterested. As he was leaving on Matzah Shabbos, the young lady surprised him. So how long should I go to yeshiva for? Would 6 months be okay? As the shliach drove Adina to the airport for her flight to Beis Chana, Minneapolis, she turned to him and said, do you want to know what changed my mind? The shliach was afraid to say anything. All he needed was to say the wrong thing and blow it. He was quiet, but she continued, nothing personal, Rabbi, but it was nothing that you said. In fact, that had no effect on me because I was so angry that I wasn't even paying attention to a word you said. But then as you turned to leave, I suddenly remembered something that happened to me 15 years ago when I was 7 years old. My father was a Holocaust survivor, she said. He lost everything. After the Holocaust, he had one child. One day he had an audience with the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He told him that after everything he'd been through, his biggest fear was that I would be lost to the Jewish faith, and then Hitler Yamach Shemoy would have succeeded in wiping out his family. The Rebbe promised him, whenever your child will need help, I will send one of my children to help her. And this was something that my father related to me regularly. When you told me you were a follower of Rabbi Schneerson, these words reverberated in my mind. I couldn't stop thinking about it. If after all these years the Rebbe sent one of his children to help me in the middle of nowhere, how can I just ignore the purpose of your mission? The girl went on to study in Beis Chana Seminary and ultimately married a Jewish boy living an observant life in Israel. A shliach. A shliach, a conduit, without even knowing it himself. This is not just one shliach story, it is our story, the story of all shluchim. And as a skater Chasid and we set out on our missions, we know that we are not alone, for we are one with our Meshaleach, and the Rebbe walks with us. When the Rebbe sent shluchim out to far corners of the world, to spiritual deserts, he said to a number of them, do not fear, because I am going with you. A shliach once wrote a letter to the Rebbe asking whether he should attend a public sports event for the sake of bonding with a fellow Jew. The Rebbe responded, I am not going to tell you what to do, but what I will tell you is that wherever you go and whatever you do, you are taking me with you. This is, on one hand, a big responsibility, but also very comforting to know, particularly in difficult and challenging times. In a private audience with the Rebbe, a shliach turned to the Rebbe in tears and said, "Rebbe, it's too difficult." The Rebbe responded, "Since when did you sign a contract with the Ribbono Shel Olam to have an easy life?" We all have our challenges. However, even as the Rebbe is no longer physically with us, we know from the teachings of the Zohar and the Tanya that when a tzaddik leaves this world, his neshama, his soul, has an even greater influence in this world than when he was alive. We can take comfort in knowing that the Rebbe's soul is ever present with those who continue in his footsteps. No doubt the Rebbe is piercing the gates of heavens with his prayers, ensuring our continued success and our ability to achieve the impossible. A woman in Sydney, Australia, became very ill. The shlucha in her neighborhood went to visit her and offered to lend her $1 from the Rebbe until she would have a complete recovery. She had asked her to return it in due course so that the woman would have faith and certainty in her recovery. This $1 was given to the shlucha by the Rebbe many years ago to give its value to tzedakah, and as a result, she was told she would have much blessing and success. A year later, the woman arrived at the shlucha's doorstep one morning unannounced. "I have something for you," she said. "I took it with me to every treatment, and it wasn't until recently that I got an all clear on my health. You have no idea how comforting it was for me to feel as though I carried the Rebbe's blessings with me at all times. I felt almost as if he personally was accompanying me on my painful journey. Today, I woke up with an overwhelming feeling that I had to return this $1 to you. I thought to myself, could it be that an emissary of the Rebbe herself feels a need to be reassured that the Rebbe's blessings and energy accompany her? I don't know, but here I am returning this $1 to you." As I stretched out my hand to take the $1 from her, my heart was filled with gratitude and my eyes with tears. "You have no idea," I said to her, "just how much I needed this message in my life this morning." We are not on this journey alone, and sometimes in various ways we are reminded. People often ask, what is the secret behind Chabad that we can't quite put our finger on? How are they able to operate continually in a way that is beyond the natural limitations? Chasid teaches us that every Jew has the power to tap into a dimension that is beyond the norms of this physical world. Hashem gives each and every one of us a powerful soul that has infinite potential to rise above the laws of nature. Because we are connected to the Rebbe, the Moshe Rabbeinu, the tzaddik of our generation, he helps us to reveal the innate power within our souls, enabling us to reach for the stars and to achieve the impossible. As shluchos of the Rebbe, we are empowered to transcend all of the limitations and barriers that stand in the way of doing what needs to be done. We can operate on a plane that is above and beyond the natural order. Fellow shluchos, it is true that we often carry huge responsibilities, huge obligations, huge workloads, huge pressures, and huge questions. But let us never, ever forget that we are being carried on spectacularly huge places, shoulders that support us, empower us, and applaud us every possible step of the way, so that even at those times when we don't know where our answers or energies are coming from, inexplicably we get our second, third, or even 120th wind to leap lechatchila ariba above and beyond the obstacles and come back bigger, better, stronger than ever before. When people turn to us and ask us, how do Chabad Shluchim have the breitkeit, the boldness and brazenness to embark upon those ambitious projects? How are we able to continually achieve the impossible? It is because we are one entity with our Mishaleach. That's how we continue to thrive and grow when all rational and natural laws say it would not happen and it should not happen. Isn't that what we do regularly as we juggle so many roles and keep going with an unfathomable energy that is almost supernatural? Isn't that what we realize when we look what we have accomplished in a mere 24 hours as the days go by? Isn't that what we do regularly when we secure that purchase and then worry about the money later? And despite the skepticism of others, we know somehow it's going to work out. The bottom line is that if we are connected, if we are tethered to our source and to our mission, we cannot go into free fall. Yes, it might be a little bit like bungee jumping for a little while, where you feel like you're plummeting into the abyss. Aber as man is makusher, but if your rope is well secured, you will be yanked right back up. Finally, I would like to conclude with a story. Recently, I received a phone call from a girl in her early 20s. She wanted to make time to come and talk to me. I hadn't seen her in a number of years. I taught her for her bat mitzvah, and she was in my bas mitzvah group, and following that we lost touch. She came to talk, and we discussed what was weighing on her heart. She shared what her life had been like over the years since we'd last seen each other. She'd strayed from the Jewish path, had gotten involved in types of behavior far removed from Torah values, and went traveling around the world with a non-Jewish male companion. At some point in her travels in Europe with her friend, she heard the sad news that her grandfather had passed away. She was very close to him and was heartbroken. Fruma, do you know what I did in the hotel that night? I locked myself in the bedroom alone and started to sing. Do you know what song I sang that night as I sobbed alone? The song you taught us at our Bas Mitzvah Shabbaton many years ago. The song about the Rebbetzin, the Rebbe's wife, how a young child turned to her and asked her where her children are, and she replied, "My children are in 770. Singing that song at that moment gave me so much comfort. It made me realize that there are physical children and there are spiritual children, and no matter what, the bond between parents and children always remains intact. That song made me feel connected again to my grandpa and to my Jewish roots. And in my heart of hearts, I knew that if I would call you, you would be there waiting for me with open arms. Here I am, and sure enough, so are you. Fellow Shluchos, we are the Shluchim, the children the Rebbe dreamed of. We strive to live up to the Rebbe's expectations, to the Hayom Yom of Ches Iyar. Most of all, because everybody knows that when they need us, when they need a heart or a home, they know that we will be there for them with open arms anywhere in the world, at any time of the day or night, even if we have never met them before and may never see them again. Wherever they go, gate a shliach. They will find dedicated shluchim who are completely committed to the cause with their hearts and souls and are one in every way with the Mishaleach. Wherever they go in the world, they find shluchos who are role models in every aspect of their lives. Esgeta Chasid, Esther Chasid, Shlofta Chasid. Together with the friends and supporters of Chabad worldwide, we will make the dream come true. Over the last few days, we have laughed, cried, verbranged, reminisced, and felt the warmth and kinship of sisters and shlichus from all over the world. Let us resolve to go home tonight with renewed vigor in the knowledge that a shliach is ein zach mit der mishaleach. Wherever we go and whatever we do, esgate a chasid. Let us resolve to continue to be the shluchim the Rebbe had faith in by connecting as his ambassadors in every aspect of our day-to-day lives on shlichus, when role modeling to our children and our communities, both inside and outside of the home. Let us reflect upon who we represent when we get dressed in the morning, how we dress when we interact with our family members throughout the day, and when we engage with our fellow Jews and with any human being we encounter. Let us learn more of the Rebbe's sichos and maimorim so that we can stay inspired by the Rebbe's teachings and have the ability to share the Rebbe's outlook with others. Let us not underestimate the power of every neshama that we touch and live by role modeling the Avas Yisrael that the Rebbe wanted us to have. In doing so, we need to remember the more we give of ourselves, the more we are actually giving to ourselves and our families, as this is the source of infinite opportunities and brachas in our own lives. Let us remember that our achievements and success come from a higher place, and we are fortunate to be the Kalim because the Rebbe is working through us because esgeta shliach. Let us remember that we are never alone because the Rebbe walks with us. Let us use our special koiches, l'mayla min hateva, these very energies that are above and beyond the natural order, to remain positive, to achieve the impossible, and to bestow blessings upon others on behalf of our Mishaleach, including and especially upon our fellow shluchos. And with Hashem's help, we know that these brachas will be fulfilled. And finally, let us rejoice in the knowledge that very soon indeed there will be a soft zum finsteren galus and alle Yiddish tzoros, an end to this long and dark exile and to all of our suffering. Ani Mamin, I believe, when Mashiach comes, the Moshe Rabbeinu of our generation will point to each and every woman in this room and say individually to each and every one of us, esgate a chasid. Here is a chasid. Here is a shlucha. Here is a superwoman. Super, because of the superhuman effort that the women here tonight have made for their families and Klal Yisrael, the Jewish people. And when that day comes, may it be very soon, and we all dance amidst tears of joy, knowing that our heartaches and challenges are finally at an end, the world will then know that once again, primarily in the merit of righteous women, Am Yisrael has finally achieved its goal. Let that glorious dance begin tonight. Kein Yehi Ratzon or B'Korev Mamish now.